AI showed me a wall light made from a tree branch that doesn't exist, so I decided to build a real one and see what reality had to say about it. This build took about 2 days of glue-ups and roughly 15 to 20 hours of shop time. The materials came out to around $40 for wood, $10 for the mounting hardware, another $10 for finish, and about $25 for the lights, sandpaper and glue aside. You'll see it all as the build comes along. Under $100 for a wall light that looks a lot more complicated than it actually is. I face glued the boards to get thickness, cleaned the edges, and laminated them into a white blank. From there, I drew a branch shape, cut it out, and sculpted it into something organic. So after a whole bunch of tries, I've ended up with something that you can see in that dark Sharpie. I think that's what I'll roughly cut out, and then we'll take it from there. For lighting, I'm using COB LEDs. They're supposed to give a continuous glow instead of visible dots. I've never used them before, so we'll figure this out together. Because I want the light to spill out from behind the branch, the piece needs to float off the wall by a couple of inches. That gap is what lets the light breathe. To make that happen, I went looking for the right hardware and landed on a simple solution. Mounts that screw directly into the wall studs and project out about 4 inches. Now these are supposed to go into your shelf, but in my case the plan is to embed part of the hardware into the branch itself, leaving roughly a 2-inch gap between the wall and the back of the piece. In theory, that should give me the neat and clean floating effect I'm after, and enough space for the light to shine freely behind it. I've never used this hardware before, so this is another first on this build. If it works, great. If not, we'll adjust. All the links are in the description. You see, social media keeps pushing this one video at me, someone turning a tree branch into a wall light. And at first glance, it looks incredible. But the more I watched it, the more it fell apart. It felt like watching a dream where tools don't quite obey physics. The router proportions were off, the cuts didn't make sense, and during the install, the person's head literally separates from their body. That was the giveaway. Whether it's AI or just very clever editing, the bigger issue is this. I wouldn't bring a raw branch into my house anyway. Mold, bugs, moisture, there are real risks that show up months or years later. I looked around locally and couldn't find anywhere that sold solid thick branches in 5 to 6 foot range. Amazon has small decorative branches for vases, and Etsy has some driftwood I'm not sure I trust. If you know a reliable source for large, properly dried branches, let me know. It's good information to have for future projects. But the idea stuck with me. I use AI to brainstorm and help me imagine, and I feel AI is great at showing us what looks possible. But craft is about discovering what actually is. So I decided to make my own version, using cheap 2x4s instead of a real branch, not to fake nature, but to respect its rules. Because a branch twists in every direction, routing a clean channel for the lights just isn't realistic, and it may not even be necessary. I'll likely mount the strip directly to the back and reinforce it if needed, as long as nothing interferes with the glow. This is the difference between an AI build and a real one. In the real world, materials always get the final say. Once the mounting locations were locked in, I went back to sculpting. But from here on out, every cut mattered. Those areas were off limits. There was no room for mistakes. I kept removing material carefully and switched to a coarse cut-saw wheel to start shaping the branch. By now, the form was getting fragile. The thinner sections could snap if I pushed too hard or let vibration build up. Clamping became just as dangerous as cutting. As the shape evolved, solid reference points disappeared, and one bad clamp could undo hours of work. So I slowed down. I marked the curve I wanted, then clamped the piece as close to that cut as I could. Keeping the clamp near the grinder reduced vibration and kept the narrow sections from flexing. At this stage, sculpting wasn't about removing wood, it was about knowing when not to. Next came the branch junctions, the points where everything tightens up. These areas were cramped, awkward, and impossible to reach cleanly. I started with the spindle sander. It cleaned up the jigsaw marks, but it left behind something I didn't like. Perfectly round cavities that felt too manufactured, too clean. So I stepped back. I switched to the Dremel and slowly broke that roundness apart, undoing the machine's perfection and nudging the shape back towards something more natural. Even then, I couldn't push it as far as I wanted. By this point, the branch was fragile and anything more aggressive risked snapping it. Just the vibrations from the angle grinder were enough to threaten the whole build. Once the form was right, it was time to soften everything. Without erasing the work that got it there, I didn't want to sand this smooth. I wanted it settled. I used a rotary sander with a soft pad and coarse paper, moving constantly, never letting it linger. 1 second too long in one spot and the shape would disappear. The narrow branches made this even harder. They were fragile enough that clamping them even close to the sanding area risked snapping them outright. So I changed the approach. I clamped only the base and used a sanding block as a support near the work. The block absorbed the vibration, added grip, and kept the branch from skating away. Once the shape was done, it was time for finish. I used Osmo, mainly because I already had an open can, but if I were starting from scratch, I probably would have gone with Danish oil. It's cheaper, and I think it suits a piece like this better. Then came the lighting. My original plan was to run the LED strips along every branch and use T-connectors where they split. In theory, it made sense. In practice, it didn't. The connectors were hard to spec, the smallest ones were still bulky, and there simply wasn't enough room to hide them behind such thin branches. I didn't want any hardware visible, so I scrapped the idea entirely. Instead, I ran a single light strip from the base to the tip of the tallest branch. And it worked. Clean, simple, and invisible. If you enjoyed this build, consider subscribing. It helps the channel and it lets me keep making projects like this. And if you know someone who'd enjoy it too, feel free to pass it along. This piece isn't perfect, and that's kind of the point. AI is really good at showing us an image of something that looks finished. But when you work with real materials, you don't get to skip the physics. You have to negotiate with it. This isn't a branch from a tree. It's a branch shaped by limits. And I think that's what makes it real.